The transport ship's doors opened with a soft hiss, and Veltar stepped onto Kepler Station Academy. The Felinari moved with smooth grace, each step careful and controlled. Their golden fur caught the artificial light, and their pointed ears twitched at every sound. Students in the docking bay stopped talking and stared. Veltar's yellow eyes swept across the crowd. Most of the beings here were herbivores. Tall Zenthari with their leaf-green skin, small Kithara with flower petals. For hair, and bulky Morvani, whose thick hides showed they ate nothing but plants. All of them looked afraid. "Is that really a carnivore?" whispered a young Zenthori to her friend. "Look at those claws," another student said, pointing at Veltar's hands. "They could tear someone apart." Veltar's tail swished once, a sign of annoyance. The whispers followed them as they walked through the station corridors. Every student they passed moved away, pressing against the walls to give the predator space. Some even ran. The Felinari had expected this reaction. Their people were hunters, born to kill and eat meat. Most species in the galaxy ate plants and found the idea of hunting other living things horrible. But Veltar had worked hard to get into this academy. They would not let fear stop them from learning Dot at the same time. Another transport arrived at a different docking bay. Jiwon Kim stepped out, carrying a simple bag over their shoulder. The human looked around the station with curious eyes. They were shorter than most aliens here, with dark hair and ordinary clothes. Nobody paid attention to them. Ji1 walked through the same corridors that Veltar had used. But students did not move away from them. Some even smiled and nodded. Humans were classified as Deathworlders, but most aliens thought they were harmless. Earth was a dangerous planet, but humans looked soft and weak compared to real predators like the Felinari. Another human exchange student said a Kithara to her friend as Jiwon passed. "They seem nice enough. Not like that scary carnivore that just arrived." Jiwon heard the comment, but said nothing. They just kept walking, taking in the sights of their new home for the next year. Both students ended up in the main orientation hall. Professor Dolian stood at the front, a tall Zenthari with kind eyes and a gentle voice. The herbivorous professor welcomed the new students warmly, talking about friendship between species and the importance of learning about each other. But when Professor Dolian's gaze fell on Veltar, their tone changed slightly. "We must remember," the professor said, looking directly at the Felinari, "that this academy is a place of peace. We expect all students to control their natural instincts. Some of you may have urges that could be harmful to others. Those urges must be kept in check at all times." Veltar's ears flattened against their head. The message was clear. The professor was talking about them. Around the hall, other students nodded and glanced at the carnivore with worried looks. Jiwon noticed this exchange, but stayed quiet. They watched Veltar's reaction and saw the hurt behind the alien's golden eyes. It was not fair, but the human said nothing. After orientation, students moved to the cafeteria for their first meal together. The large room was filled with long tables where different species sat in groups. Zenthari sat with other Zenthari, Kithara with their own kind, and so on. Veltar entered the cafeteria and looked around. Every table fell silent as they passed. The Felinari took a tray of food, raw meat that looked bloody and fresh, and searched for a place to sit. But no, one would let them join their table. Each time Veltar approached, students would suddenly remember they needed to be somewhere else, or they would make excuses about saving seats for friends. Finally, Veltar sat alone at a table in the corner. They began to eat, trying to ignore the stares and whispers around them. The meat was good, but it tasted bitter in their mouth. Jiwon got their own food, a simple meal of cooked Vegetables and what looked like processed protein, and surveyed the room. They saw the lonely carnivore and frowned slightly. A young Vorthan named Kale was walking past Veltar's table, carrying a tray of fresh salad. The deer-like alien was nervous, as most Vorthan were around predators. His hooves clicked anxiously on the floor as he tried to move quickly past the carnivore, but Kale moved too fast. His foot caught on a chair leg, and he stumbled. His tray flew forward, spilling green leaves and fruit all over Veltar's table and lapdot. The cafeteria went completely silent. Veltar jumped up, covered in salad. Their natural reflexes kicked in, ears back, claws extended, a low hiss escaping their throat. It was an automatic response to being surprised, but to everyone watching, it looked like an attack position. Kale fell backward, terrified. "Please, don't hurt me," he cried. Other students screamed and ran. Tables were overturned as herbivores fled from the dangerous predator. Within seconds, only a few beings remained in the cafeteria, and most of them were pressed against the far walls. Security. Alarms began to sound. Minho Lee, a human security officer, came running with 2 other guards. They surrounded Veltar, who still had their claws out and was breathing hard. "Stand down," Minho ordered, his hand on his stun weapon. Veltar looked around at the chaos they had accidentally caused. Their shoulders sagged in defeat. "I was just startled," they said quietly. "I did not mean to scare anyone." Threatening behavior toward other students is grounds for immediate expulsion, one of the other guards said. "But I was not threatening anyone," Veltar protested. "Your claws were out," the guard replied. "That looks like a threat to me." Veltar's tail drooped. They slowly retracted their claws and stood very still. Around them, the remaining students watched with fearful eyes. This was their first day, and already they were about to be kicked out of the academy. Then something unexpected happened. Ji-won Kim walked calmly across the cafeteria, stepping around the spilled food and overturned chairs. They carried their tray in one hand and moved without any sign of fear. Every eye in the room followed the human as they approached the dangerous situation. "Excuse me," Ji-won said politely to the guards. Then they turned to Veltar and asked, "Are you hungry?" Veltar stared at them in confusion. "What?" Ji-won reached into their pocket and pulled out a protein bar. They held it out to the Felinari. "You didn't get to finish your meal. This might help." The simple gesture shocked everyone present. A human was offering food to a carnivore who had just displayed threatening behavior. It made no sense to the herbivorous witnesses. Veltar looked at the protein bar, then at Ji-won's calm face. Slowly, they took the offered food. "Thank you," they said quietly. Ji-won nodded and sat down at Veltar's messy table, pushing aside the spilled salad. They began eating their own meal as if nothing unusual had happened. The security guards looked confused. Minho Lee studied the scene carefully. The human showed no fear, and the carnivore had calmed down completely. The threat seemed to be over. "Clean up this mess," Minho told the cafeteria staff. "And next time," he said to Veltar, "try to keep your claws to yourself." As the guards left, other students slowly began to return to the cafeteria, but they kept their distance from Veltar's table, forming a wide circle around the carnivore and the human who sat with them. Veltar unwrapped the protein bar and took a small bite. It was not as good as meat, but it was food. More importantly, it was kindness from a stranger. "Why did you do that?" Veltar asked. Ji-won shrugged. "You looked hungry, and it was not really your fault that Kale tripped. But I am a predator. Your people should fear me." "Should they?" Ji-won asked, taking another bite of their vegetables. "You have not hurt anyone. You just got startled when food was thrown at you." Most beings would react the same way. Veltar studied the human more carefully. Jiwan was smaller than them, with no visible claws or fangs. Their teeth looked flat, meant for grinding rather than tearing. But there was something in their dark eyes that seemed different from the other herbivores. Something that did not look afraid. "What is your name?" Veltar asked. "Jiwan Kim. I am here to study xenobiology. I am Veltar. I am studying the same thing." "Interesting," Jiwan said. "Maybe we will have classes together." Around them, students continued to whisper and point. The sight of a human calmly eating with a carnivore was unusual enough to draw attention. But most of the whispers were about Veltar, not Jiwan. The carnivore was still seen as the dangerous one. Professor Dalian appeared in the cafeteria doorway and saw the two students sitting together. The Zenthary's expression was hard to read. They approached the table slowly. "Is everything all right here?" the professor asked. "Fine," Jiwan replied. "Just having lunch." "Veltar, I trust there will be no more incidents like this one, Professor." Dolian said sternly. "It was an accident," Veltar said. "I was startled when the food spilled on me." "Accidents or not, you must learn to control your reactions. Other students have the right to feel safe." "I understand," Veltar said, though. Their ears remained flat against their head. Professor Dolian looked at Jiwan with curiosity. "It is unusual to see a human sitting with a carnivore so casually." "Is it?" Jiwan asked. "We are both students here. We are both studying the same subjects. It seems normal to me." The professor had no good answer to that. They nodded stiffly and walked away, leaving the two students alone again. As the meal period ended, students began to leave for their next activities. Veltar finished the protein bar and looked at Jiwan. "Thank you," they said again. 3 days passed since the cafeteria incident. Veltar had managed to avoid any more trouble, but they still ate alone and walked through empty corridors. Other students would change direction when they saw the Felinari coming, or suddenly remember. They had urgent business elsewhere. Jiwan, meanwhile, had settled into academy life easily. Their human roommate, Nari Choi, was a graduate student studying interstellar law. She was friendly, but busy with her own advanced studies. Most of the time, Jiwan had the room to themselves. The first xenobiology class was held in a large lecture hall with curved rows of seats. Students filed in and chose their spots, with different species naturally grouping together. Veltar entered and saw that the only empty seats were in the front row or scattered in the back corners, where no one wanted to sit near a predator. Jiwan arrived a few minutes later and noticed the seating pattern. Without hesitation, they walked to the front row and sat 2 seats away from Veltar, close enough to be friendly, but far enough to give the carnivore space. Veltar glanced over and nodded slightly. Jiwan nodded back. Professor Dolian entered and began setting up their materials. The Zenthari looked out over the class and frowned when they saw the seating arrangement. Most students were clustered together in the middle and back rows, leaving an obvious gap around the carnivore. "For today's lesson, we will be discussing ecosystem balance," the professor announced. "But first, I want to address something. Science requires us to work together, regardless of our personal feelings or natural instincts." The professor's eyes moved between Veltar and the rest of the class. "Therefore, I am assigning research partners for your first major project. You will study the ecosystem of one species' homeworld and present your findings in 2 weeks." Students began to look around nervously, hoping to be paired with their friends, or at least someone from their own species. "Veltar," Professor Dolian said, looking directly at the Felinari, "you will be working with Jiwan Kim." Several students gasped. A few looked relieved that they did not have to work with the carnivore. Jiwan simply pulled out a notebook and wrote down the assignment details. Veltar's tail twitched once, but they kept their expression neutral. At least it was the human who had been kind to them, not someone who would refuse to work with a predator. After class, Jiwan approached Veltar's desk. "Should we meet later to discuss the project?" "If you want to," Veltar said carefully. "I will understand if you would prefer to ask the professor for a different partner." "Why would I do that?" "Because I am a carnivore. Working with me might hurt your reputation with other students." Jiwan looked around the lecture hall at the other students who were forming their own study groups. "I came here to learn about xenobiology, not to worry about reputation. Besides, you probably know more about ecosystem balance than most students here. What makes you think that?" "You are a predator. Predators have to understand their prey, their environment, and how everything connects. Otherwise, they don't survive." Veltar blinked in surprise. Most beings saw carnivores as simple killers who only thought about hunting. This human understood that successful predators needed to be intelligent and aware of complex relationships. "You want to study my homeworld?" Veltar asked. "It would make sense. You would have first-hand knowledge of the ecosystem there." They agreed to meet in the library that evening. When Jiwan arrived, they found Veltar sitting alone at a large table in the back corner. The carnivore had several books and data tablets spread out in front of them. "I brought information about Felinara," Veltar said as Jiwan sat down. "My homeworld." Jiwan examined the materials. There were detailed maps, climate data, and biological surveys of hundreds of species. "This is impressive. You came well prepared." "I wanted to do well in this class," Veltar admitted. "It may be my only chance to study here." "Why do you say that?" "If I fail or cause more problems, they will send me home. No other academy will accept a Felinari after that." Jiwan studied their partner's face. Veltar was trying to hide it, but the human could see the worry in their golden eyes. "Then we will make sure you succeed." They spent the next 2 hours going through the data. Jiwan asked detailed questions about hunting patterns, seasonal migrations, and the relationships between different predator and prey species on Felinara. What surprised Veltar was how much the human already seemed to know about predator behavior. Jiwan asked about pack hunting strategies, territorial boundaries, and the social structures of carnivorous species with an understanding that went beyond basic textbook knowledge. "You know a lot about predators for a herbivore," Veltar observed. "Who said I was a herbivore?" Jiwan asked, not looking up from the data tablet they were reading. "Well, you are human. Humans are classified as omnivores, but most species assume you eat mostly plants because you look so ... harmless." Jiwan finally looked up and smiled slightly. "Assumptions can be dangerous." "What do you mean?" "My family studies marine predators. On Earth, sharks, whales, deep-sea hunters. I grew up learning about how they hunt, how they survive, how they maintain the balance of ocean ecosystems. So you do understand predators better than most people realize." Veltar leaned back in their chair, studying their human partner with new interest. "What do Earth's predators hunt?" "Everything," Jiwan said simply. "Fish, other marine mammals, squid, smaller sharks. Some of Earth's predators are bigger than your people could imagine." "How big?" Jiwan pulled up a holographic display from their tablet. A massive creature appeared above the table, rotating slowly. It was sleek and powerful, with rows of sharp teeth and eyes that seemed to track movement even in the static image. "This is a great white shark. It can grow to be 6 meters long and weigh over 2 tons. It hunts seals, fish, and sometimes other sharks." Veltar stared at the hologram. The creature was larger than most Felinari and looked perfectly designed for killing. "And there are bigger ones?" "Much bigger." Sperm whales can grow to 20 meters and dive deeper than any other mammal to hunt giant squid in the darkness. Blue whales are even larger, but they eat tiny creatures called krill. Your world has many predators. Yes, and they are all part of a complex ecosystem that has existed for millions of years. Remove the predators, and everything falls apart. The prey species overpopulate, eat all the plants, and then starve. Add too many predators, and they hunt their prey to extinction and then die themselves. Veltar nodded slowly. That is exactly what happens on Felinara. My people learned long ago that we must hunt responsibly, or there will be nothing left to hunt. Most herbivorous species don't understand that, Jiwan said. They see predation as evil, not as a necessary part of nature. Is that why you sat with me in the cafeteria? Because you understand predators? Jiwan shrugged. I sat with you because you looked lonely, and because what happened was not really your fault. Understanding predators is just bonus information for our project. They worked together for another hour, building a detailed analysis of Felinara's ecosystem. Jiwan's questions helped Veltar think about their homeworld in new ways, while Veltar's first-hand knowledge provided details that no textbook could match. Other students occasionally walked past their table, and Jiwan noticed how they stared at the unusual partnership. A few looked confused, some seemed worried, but most just appeared curious about why a human would choose to work so closely with a carnivore. Does it bother you? Veltar asked, noticing the same stares. Does what bother me? The way other students look at us. Some of them probably think you are strange for working with me. Jiwan glanced around at the other study groups scattered throughout the library. Let them think what they want. We have work to do, but your reputation will be fine if we produce good work. Besides, Jiwan added with a small smile, I think you might be surprised by how much we have in common. Such as? We are both outsiders here. You because you are a carnivore. Me because I am human. Most species see us as fundamentally different from them. Veltar had not thought about it that way before. Humans were classified as Deathworlders, beings from dangerous planets who had survived conditions that would kill most other species. But they looked so harmless compared to obvious predators like the Felinari. Do other students treat you differently because you are human? Veltar asked. Sometimes. They are polite, but I can tell they think of us as primitive survivors who got lucky. They don't expect much from humans intellectually. That seems foolish. You clearly know more about ecosystem dynamics than most students in our class. Kank. And you clearly have more self-control than most students give you credit for. As they packed up their materials for the evening, Veltar realized that this was the longest conversation they had had with anyone since arriving at the academy. The human did not treat them like a dangerous animal or make them feel like they had to apologize for their nature. Same time tomorrow? Jiwan asked. Yes, and Jiwan? Thank you for taking this project seriously. Many students would have done the minimum work required just to get through the assignment. I don't do anything halfway, Jiwan replied, especially not when it involves predators. There was something in the human's tone that made Veltar look at them more carefully. But Jiwan was already walking away, moving through the library with quiet steps that barely made any sound on the floor. The day of their presentation arrived. Jiwan and Veltar had spent hours preparing their analysis of Felinara's ecosystem. Their research was thorough and detailed, showing how predators and prey maintained perfect balance on the carnivores. Homeworld. The lecture hall was full as students gathered to watch the presentations. Veltar sat in the front row, trying to stay calm. They had never spoken in front of so many beings before, especially ones who viewed them with suspicion. We will go fifth, Jiwan said, checking their notes one final time. That gives us time to see how the other groups present their work. The first 4 presentations were standard academic work. Students talked about peaceful herbivorous worlds where different plant-eating species lived in harmony. The ecosystems were stable and predictable, with no violence or death involved in maintaining balance. Then Professor Dolian called Jiwan and Veltar to the front. Today we will examine Felinara, Jiwan began, activating a holographic display of the planet. A world where predators and prey have evolved together for millions of years. The image showed a beautiful world with vast grasslands, dense forests, and crystal-clear rivers. It looked peaceful and welcoming. Felinara supports over 3,000 species, Veltar continued, their voice steady despite their nervousness. Predators make up only 8% of the total population, but they are essential for maintaining ecological balance. A student in the third row raised her hand. It was Lysa, a Kithara with purple flower petals for hair. How can you say? That killing is essential? Life is precious. Taking life is always wrong. Murmurs of agreement came from other herbivorous students. Veltar's ears flattened slightly, but before they could respond, Gaiwan stepped forward. Let me show you what happens when predators are removed from an ecosystem, Jiwan said calmly. The holographic display changed to show a different planet. Green fields stretched in all directions, filled with countless herbivorous animals. This is Kepler 442b. Colonists removed all predators because they believed, like you, that killing was wrong. Jiwan's voice remained perfectly calm and professional. Within 50 years, the herbivore population had grown beyond the planet's ability to support them. The image shifted to show the same fields, but now they were brown and barren. Skeletons of dead animals littered the ground. The herbivores ate every plant on the planet. Then they starved, all of them. Billions of animals died because there were no predators to control their numbers. The lecture hall fell silent. Even Professor Dolian looked shocked by the stark. Images. Another student, a Zenthari named Colvin, stood up. But surely there must be other ways to control population without violence? Such as? Jiwan asked. Education, birth control, voluntary restrictions. Show me one species that has successfully controlled its own population through voluntary means, Jiwan challenged. Every stable ecosystem in the galaxy relies on predation, disease, or environmental limits to prevent overpopulation. Colvin sat down, unable to provide an example. Veltar watched their human partner with growing amazement. Jiwan was calmly and systematically destroying every argument against predation, using pure logic and scientific evidence. But predators are violent and dangerous, another student protested. They kill without mercy. Do they? Jiwan asked. The holographic display changed again, showing a pack of Felinari hunting a herd of grazing animals. Watch carefully, Jiwan instructed. Veltar's people could kill any animal in this herd, but notice what they actually do. The hologram showed the predators selecting one animal from the edge of the herd. It was old and moved slowly, clearly. Sick or injured. They take the weakest member, Jiwan explained. Not the strongest, not the youngest, not the healthiest. By removing sick and weak animals, predators strengthen the prey population and prevent disease from spreading. That is still killing, Lysa insisted. Yes, it is. One animal dies so that hundreds can live healthier lives. Without predators, that sick animal would have infected the entire herd. Professor Dolian stepped forward. These are interesting points, but surely you are not suggesting that carnivorous species are superior to herbivorous ones? Jiwan turned to face the professor directly. I am suggesting that both are necessary. Predators and prey evolve together. Remove either one, and the entire system collapses. But carnivores are inherently aggressive, the professor argued. They pose a danger to peaceful species. More dangerous than herbivores? Jiwan asked. Of course. Herbivores do not kill other beings. Ji-won smiled slightly, and for just a moment, something flickered in their dark eyes that made several students shift uncomfortably in their seats. Professor, what is the largest and most dangerous animal on Earth? I would assume some kind of predator, a large carnivore. Actually, it is the hippopotamus, a herbivore. Hippos kill more humans every year than lions, leopards, and crocodiles. Combined, they are territorial, aggressive, and attack without warning. The professor looked surprised. But they eat plants. Yes, they do. And they are still incredibly dangerous. Diet does not determine behavior, Professor. A hungry herbivore protecting its territory can be just as violent as any predator. Ji-won activated another hologram, showing massive earth animals. Elephants have been known to attack villages and destroy crops when they feel threatened. Water buffalo will charge anything that comes near their calves. Even deer will fight viciously during mating season. But those are exceptions, Professor Dolian protested. Are they? Or have you simply never studied herbivorous aggression because it does not fit your assumptions about plant eaters being peaceful? The challenge hung in the air. Students looked between their professor and the human student who was questioning. Everything they had been taught about predators and prey. Veltar stepped forward to support their partner. Ji-won is correct. On Felinara, the most dangerous animal is not a predator. It is the Korthvol, a massive herbivore that eats tree bark. They are 12 feet tall, weigh as much as a small transport, and will attack anything that comes near. Their feeding grounds. You see? Ji-won said. Violence is not limited to carnivores. It is a survival tool used by many species when necessary. But predators hunt for pleasure, another student argued. They kill even when they are not hungry. Do they? Ji-won asked. Veltar, does your species hunt for pleasure? Never, Veltar replied firmly. Every hunt serves a purpose. We take only what we need to survive, and we use every part of what we kill. Hunting for pleasure would be wasteful and dishonorable. What about earth predators? Professor Dolian asked Ji-won. Same principle. Lions do not hunt when their bellies are full. Sharks do not attack unless they are hungry or threatened. The idea that predators kill for fun is a myth created by prey species who do not understand predator behavior. Ji-won paused and looked around the lecture hall. Every student was listening intently now, even those who had been skeptical at the beginning. The truth is that predators are often more controlled and disciplined than prey species. They have to be. A predator that wastes energy on unnecessary kills will starve. A predator that hunts carelessly will be injured and unable to feed itself or its family. Then why do prey species fear predators so much? Professor Dolian asked. Because fear keeps them alive, Ji-won replied. A prey animal that is not afraid of predators will not survive long enough to reproduce. Fear is an adaptation, just like hunting is an adaptation. Veltar realized that their human partner was doing more than just defending predators. Ji-won was teaching the entire class about the complex relationships that existed in nature. The human understood these concepts better than most professors. How do you know so much about predator behavior? Professor Dolian asked. Ji-won was quiet for a moment, and when they spoke, their voice was softer than before. Because humans are predators too, Professor. We may not look like it, but we evolved as hunters. We understand predators because we are predators. The lecture hall erupted in surprised murmurs. Several students looked shocked. Humans were supposed to be harmless Deathworlders who had survived their dangerous planet through luck and cooperation. Humans are omnivores, Professor Dolian said. You eat plants as well as meat. Yes, we do. But we evolved as pursuit predators. My species hunted mammoth, giant bears, and saber-toothed cats. We did not do it with claws or fangs like Veltar's. People, We did it with intelligence, patience, and cooperation. Jiwan's eyes moved slowly across the faces in the lecture hall. We are persistence hunters, Professor. We track our prey for days or weeks, following them until they are too exhausted to run anymore. Then we kill them with tools we made specifically for that purpose. The room had gone completely silent. Students stared at the human with new understanding, and in some cases, new fear. Most predators hunt by ambush or short chase, Jiwan continued. Humans hunt by never giving up. We follow our prey across continents if necessary. We are the predators that other predators learn to fear. Veltar looked at their partner with amazement. This quiet, seemingly harmless human had just revealed themselves as something far more dangerous than any Felinari. That concludes our presentation, Jiwan said, their voice returning to its normal calm tone. Questions? After the presentation, everything changed at Kepler Station Academy. Students looked at Jiwan differently now. The quiet human who had seemed so harmless was actually a predator, possibly more dangerous than Veltar. Whispers followed Jiwan through the corridors, just as they had once followed the Felinari. But these whispers were different. They carried fear. Did you see how they talked about hunting? A Kithara student said to her friend as Jiwan passed. They sounded like they enjoyed it. I heard humans used to hunt other humans, another student whispered. What if they still do? Why are their eyes so dark? It's like they're always watching us. Jiwan ignored the comments and continued to their next class. But Veltar noticed how other students now moved away from both of them. Not just the obvious carnivore dot in the cafeteria. The situation became worse. Groups of herbivorous students would stop talking when Jiwan approached. Some would get up and leave their tables entirely. The human found themselves eating alone more often than not. Ironically, this brought Jiwan and Veltar closer together. They were both outcasts now, both seen as dangerous predators by the peaceful herbivorous majority. I am sorry, Veltar said, as they sat together at their usual isolated table. Your presentation helped me, but it hurt your reputation? Did it? Jiwan asked, taking a bite of their meal. Or did it just reveal the truth about what I am? You are not dangerous to other students. Are you sure about that? Jiwan asked quietly. Something in their tone made Veltar look at them more carefully. The human's face was calm, but their dark eyes seemed to be constantly moving, tracking the movements of other students around the cafeteria. What do you mean? Veltar asked. I mean that everything I said in that presentation was true. Humans are persistence hunters. We evolved to track and kill prey that was bigger, stronger, and faster than us. We did it by being smarter and never giving up. But you would not hurt anyone here. No, Jiwan agreed. I would not, but the instincts are still there. I can't turn them off. To prove their point, Jiwan nodded toward a table of Xanthari students across the room. The one on the left is nervous. About something. Look at how he keeps glancing at the door. The female next to him is lying about something. Her body language doesn't match her words. The young one at the end is sick, probably coming down with a respiratory infection based on how often he's touching his throat. Veltar followed Jiwan's gaze and realized the human was right about all three observations. How did you know all that? Pattern recognition. Humans evolved to read the behavior of prey animals and other humans. We had to know when something was wrong, when someone was lying, when someone was weak. It helped us survive. That is ... unsettling. Now you understand why the other students are afraid, Jiwan said. They can sense that I'm watching them, even when I'm not trying to. Their prey instincts are telling them that there's a predator nearby. Word of the human's revelation spread quickly through the academy. Professor Dolian called a special faculty meeting to discuss the situation with the predatory students. The herbivorous professors were worried about the safety and comfort of their peaceful students. We may have made a mistake accepting both. A carnivore and a human in the same term, Professor Dolian said to the other faculty members. The combination is making other students extremely uncomfortable. The human has done nothing wrong, pointed out Professor Yuthara, one of the few carnivorous faculty members at the academy. They have simply been honest about their nature. Honest? In a way that terrifies our herbivorous students, Professor Dolian replied. We are receiving complaints daily. Some students are requesting transfers to other institutions. Because they finally understand what humans really are? Professor Yuthara asked. That seems like education to me. Professor Dolian was not. Amused, we need to find a way to demonstrate that these predatory students can coexist peacefully with herbivorous species. If we cannot, we may have to ask them to leave. What do you suggest? A practical test. We will create a controlled scenario that allows us to observe predator behavior in a safe environment. The test was announced the next day. Professor Dolian called it a cooperative learning exercise, but everyone understood what it really was, a way to prove that predators were too dangerous for a peaceful academic environment. Students will navigate a complex maze, the professor explained to the assembled class. The goal is to reach the center without being caught by designated hunters. This will teach us about predator-prey dynamics in a safe, controlled setting. Who will be the hunters? Asked Lysa, the Cathara student who had challenged their presentation. We will need volunteers, Professor Dolian said, looking directly at Veltar. Preferably someone with natural hunting instincts. Veltar started to stand, knowing they were expected to volunteer. But before they could speak, Jiwan raised their hand. I will do it, the human said calmly. Professor Dolian looked surprised. Are you certain? This exercise is designed to test natural predatory behavior. I understand, Jiwan replied. I volunteer to be the hunter. Excited whispers spread through the classroom. The herbivorous students were eager to see this test. Most of them believed that humans were not really dangerous predators, despite what Jiwan had said in the presentation. This would prove that the quiet human was just trying to sound impressive. Very well, Professor Dolian agreed. The exercise will take place tomorrow in the station's training facility. All students except the hunter will have 30 minutes to enter the maze and find hiding spots. Then the hunter will be released to track them down. What happens when the hunter finds someone? Asked Colven, the Zenthari student. They will be marked as caught and removed from the exercise, the professor explained. The goal is to see how long prey species can evade a predator in a controlled environment. That evening, Jiwan and Veltar met in the library as usual. But instead of studying, they talked about the upcoming test. Are you sure about this? Veltar asked. Everyone expects you to fail. They think humans are not real predators. What do you think? Jiwan asked. Veltar was quiet for a moment. Over the past weeks, they had watched their human partner carefully. Jiwan moved differently than other students, quieter, more aware of their surroundings. They seemed to notice things that others missed. I think they are going to be surprised. Veltar said finally. Why? Because you have been hunting them since the day you arrived. You just haven't caught anyone yet. Jiwan looked up from the book they had been reading. What makes you say that? The way you watch other students. The way you know their habits, their schedules, their fears. You have been studying them like prey without even realizing it. And that doesn't bother you? Should it? I am a predator too. I recognize hunting behavior when I see it. Jiwan smiled slightly. You might be the only one who does. The next day, students gathered in the training facility. The maze was impressive. 3 levels of corridors, rooms, and hiding spaces spread across a large area. There were ventilation shafts, maintenance tunnels, and dozens of places where someone could hide, Professor Dolian explained the rules one final time. Students have 30 minutes to hide. The hunter will then have 2 hours to find as many of them as possible. This is not a competition. It is a learning experience about predator-prey relationships. The herbivorous students entered the maze confidently. Many of them had chosen their hiding spots in advance, working together to find the best locations. They chatted and laughed as they dispersed through the corridors. Jiwan waited outside the maze entrance, sitting calmly on a bench. They showed no signs of nervousness or excitement. Veltar watched from the observation area with the faculty members. The human seems very relaxed, Professor Dolian observed. Perhaps too relaxed. Or perhaps they know something we do not, Professor Youth Ara replied. When the 30 minutes ended, Professor Dolian activated the intercom. Hunter, you may begin. Jiwan stood up slowly and walked to the maze entrance. They paused for a moment, tilting their head as if listening to something. Then they stepped inside and disappeared from view. The faculty and remaining students watched through security monitors as Jiwan moved through the maze. The human's behavior was nothing like what anyone expected. Instead of rushing around looking for hidden students, Jiwan moved slowly and deliberately. They stopped frequently, examining the floor, walls, and air vents. They seemed to be following invisible trails that only they could see. What are they doing? Professor Dolian asked. Tracking, Veltar said quietly. They are following scent trails and other signs left by the hiding students. But the maze has been cleaned and sterilized, the professor protested. Has it been cleaned of microscopic skin cells? Of the oils from students' hands when they touched? The walls? Of the unique chemical signatures that every being leaves behind when they are nervous or excited? Professor Dolian stared at the monitor in growing alarm as they realized what Veltar was suggesting. On the screen, Jiwan had reached their first target. A young Kithara student had hidden in what she thought was a perfect spot, inside a storage cabinet in a room far from the main corridors. But Jiwan walked directly to the cabinet and opened it without hesitation. How did they know I was here? The student asked in shock as she was escorted out of the maze. By the end of the first hour, only 3 students remained hidden in the maze. The faculty watched in stunned silence as Jiwan moved through the corridors with deadly precision. Every step was calculated, every movement purposeful. 19 students. Caught in 60 minutes, Professor Yathara said quietly. That is not luck. Professor Dolian's face had gone pale. This cannot be normal human behavior. Can it not? Veltar asked from their position in the observation area. You asked, too. See predatory instincts. This is what they look like when humans stop pretending to be harmless. On the monitor, Jiwan had entered the ventilation system. They crawled through the narrow spaces with surprising speed, following a trail that only they could detect. Other students had tried to hide in the air ducts, thinking they would be safe there. They were wrong. Jiwan emerged from a ceiling vent directly above where Kolvan, the Zenthari student, was hiding behind a false wall. The human dropped down silently and tapped the terrified herbivore on the shoulder. Found you, Jiwan said calmly. Kolvan screamed. 20 students caught, Professor Dolian announced to the remaining observers. His voice shook slightly. Only 2 remained hidden. In the maze, Jiwan paused and tilted their head again, listening. Then they smiled, not the gentle expression the other students were used to, but something that showed teeth and looked genuinely predatory. They had found the final 2 students. Kale, the young Vorthan who had spilled food on Veltar weeks ago, was hiding in a maintenance tunnel beneath the maze. He had thought himself completely safe, buried under the facility where no one would think to look. But Jiwan moved directly to a maintenance hatch in the floor and opened it. They dropped down into the tunnel system and began to crawl through the narrow space, following Kale's scent trail. The deer-like alien heard them coming and tried to run deeper into the tunnels. But the passages were too narrow for his bulky frame, while Jiwon moved through them like they had been designed for. Human anatomy. Kale reached a dead end and turned to find the human just meters behind him. In the dim light of the maintenance tunnel, Jiwon's eyes seemed to glow with reflected light, just like a nocturnal predator. "Please," Kale whispered. "I am sorry about the cafeteria incident. I did not mean to cause trouble for you and Veltar." "No," Jiwon replied gently. "This is not about that. This is just the exercise." They tagged Kale as caught and helped him crawl back to the main maze. The Vorthan was shaking as he was escorted out. 21 students, Professor Dolyan announced. 1 remains. The final student was Lysa, the Cathara, who had challenged their presentation about predators. She had chosen her hiding spot very carefully, inside a sealed storage container that blocked all scent and sound. She was certain that no predator could find her there, but Jiwon did not need to smell her or hear her. They had been tracking all the students since the exercise began, and they knew exactly where each one had gone. Process of elimination led them directly to Lisa's container. The humans stood outside the sealed storage unit for several minutes, not moving. They simply waited. Inside the container, Lysa began to panic. She could not see out, but somehow she knew the predator was there. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. She started to sweat despite the cool temperature. Jiwon waited patiently. They knew that prey animals could not stay calm when they sensed a predator nearby. Fear would make Lysa do something stupid. Finally, the Cathara could not stand it anymore. She burst out of the container, gasping for fresh air. Jiwon was standing right there, waiting for her. "Exercise complete," Professor Dolyan announced over the intercom. All students had been found. Total time, 93 minutes. The faculty and remaining observers sat in shocked silence as Jiwon emerged from the maze. The human looked exactly the same as when they had entered, calm, quiet, and completely unbothered by what they had just accomplished. "How?" Professor Dolyan asked when Jiwon reached the observation area. "How what?" Jiwon replied, "How did you track 22 students through a sterile maze in less than 2 hours?" Jiwon shrugged. "I followed their trails. Scent, heat signatures, disturbed dust patterns, fingerprints on walls, stress pheromones in the air. Every being leaves traces when they move through a space. But the maze was cleaned for normal contaminants, yes. But you cannot remove every molecule that indicates someone passed through an area. Humans evolved to track prey across vast distances using signs that other species cannot even detect." Veltar watched their human partner with new understanding. "You have been hunting us all along, haven't you?" "Not hunting," Jiwon corrected. "Observing, cataloging, learning your patterns and behaviors. It is what humans do automatically in any new environment, even when you do not intend to hunt. Especially then. We evolved to always be ready to hunt, even during peaceful times. You never know when you might need to track something." Professor Yathara stepped forward. "Show us," they said. "Show you what?" "Show us what you observed about the other faculty members during your time here." Jiwon looked around at the professors gathered in the observation area. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Jiwon pointed to Professor Dolyan. "You have been stressed about having carnivorous students in your class. You eat when you are nervous. There are always food crumbs on your robes after difficult lectures. You also have a mild respiratory condition that you try to hide." The Zenthari professor looked shocked. "How could you possibly know about my breathing problems?" "You favor your left lung when you take deep breaths. The pattern is very subtle, but it is consistent." Jiwon pointed to another professor. "You have been having relationship troubles with your mate. You stopped wearing your bonding jewelry 3 weeks ago, and you have been eating alone in your office instead of meeting your partner for lunch. That is private information, the professor protested. No, Jiwan said calmly. That is observable behavior. Humans notice when social patterns change because it might indicate danger or opportunity. They continued around the room, revealing personal details about each faculty member that they had gathered simply by paying attention. Dietary habits, health issues, family problems, financial stress. Nothing was hidden from human observation skills. This is why the herbivorous students are afraid of you, Veltar realized. You know things about them that they have not told anyone. Yes, and they can sense that I know, even if they cannot explain how. Professor Dolian sank into a chair. We have made a terrible mistake. What mistake? Professor Yathara asked. We thought the carnivore was the dangerous one, Professor Dolian said, looking at Veltar. We watched them constantly, worried about their claws and fangs and hunting instincts. Meanwhile, we ignored the human because they looked harmless. I am harmless, Jiwan said. I have no intention of hurting anyone here, but you could hurt them if you wanted to. Jiwan was quiet for a long moment. Professor, my species hunted woolly mammoths with pointed sticks. We tracked them across frozen continents for weeks until they collapsed from exhaustion. Then we killed them with tools we made from rocks and bones. But that was thousands of years ago. The instincts are still there. The abilities are still there. Modern humans may not hunt mammoths anymore, but we hunt other things. We hunt knowledge. We hunt success. We hunt solutions to problems. We hunt because that is what we are. Veltar stepped closer to their human partner. Is that why you helped me in the cafeteria? Because you recognized another predator? Partly, Jiwan admitted, but also because I knew you were not the real threat here. You are honest about what you are. Everyone can see your claws and fangs, and knows to be careful around you. That makes you safer than most species here. Safer than humans? Much safer. Humans are persistence predators. Veltar, we do not give up. Ever. If I wanted to hurt someone in this academy, I would study them for weeks or months until I knew everything about their habits, their fears, their weaknesses. Then I would wait for the perfect moment to strike. And no one would see it coming, Veltar realized. No one would see it coming, Jiwan confirmed, because humans are very good at looking harmless right up until the moment we are not. Professor, Dolian stood up slowly. What do we do with this information? You learn from it, Professor Yathara said. You change how you teach students about predator-prey relationships. You stop assuming that obvious predators are more dangerous than subtle ones. The curriculum will need to be completely revised, Professor Dolian said weakly. Yes, it will. And Jiwan should help write the new material. Jiwan looked surprised. Me, you understand predatory behavior better than most of our faculty, Professor Yathara explained. And you can teach herbivorous species how to recognize different types of hunters. What about Veltar? Jiwan asked. They understand predators too. Both of you, Professor Yathara agreed. The academy needs teachers who can explain predatory instincts without bias or fear. As the faculty meeting ended, Jiwan and Veltar walked back to their dormitories together. Other students in the corridors gave them a much wider space than before. Word of the maze exercise had spread quickly, and everyone now understood what the human was capable of. Do you regret it? Veltar asked. Showing them what you really are? No, Jiwan replied. It was time they knew the truth. Humans have been pretending to be harmless for too long.